Welcome to Night Whisper. Night Whisper brings you the darkest tales from the shadows. Join our community. Subscribe, leave a like, and prepare yourself for stories that will haunt your dreams. The storage unit cost me $100, and what it contained is a bunker filled with decades of paperwork and evidence that something has been stalking us for the last 40 years. But now it knows that I possess those files, and it's coming for me next. The first time I viewed the storage unit located in Moreno Valley, I did not know that my life was soon to take a dramatic turn. In fact, there are doors that, once opened, can never be closed again. It was 6 in the morning, and the pink light of day was rising outside the desert of California. The auction for the storage unit was supposed to begin at 7, and I was on schedule, as per usual. I had been taking part in this for the 7th year, searching for these storage units that were auctioned off and reselling the contents of the unit on eBay or at the swap meets. Most of the units were nothing but junk. Then again, sometimes you hit pay dirt. It was all about taking the gamble, and I was the kind of man who loved to gamble. There were about 15 other people at the facility. Familiar faces. People who did this long enough learned to recognize each other. There was an unspoken competition between us. Who had the better eye? Who could tell what was valuable inside? The auctioneer, Wayne Kowalski, was walking us through the units with his clipboard, announcing which ones were up for sale today. 5 units total. The first 3 were garbage, old clothes, broken furniture, worthless electronics. The 4th unit had what looked like an antique bed frame, but I didn't want to go too high on it. The price climbed fast, and someone else took it. The 5th unit was different, Unit B47. In the far back corner of the facility, away from the main road. The door hadn't been opened in 15 years. When Wayne cut the lock and rolled the door up, we couldn't quite see what was inside because the morning sun hadn't reached this corner yet. We shined our flashlights inside. Cardboard boxes, lots of them, stacked neatly, covered with folded tarps. There was no dust. That was strange. After 15 years, there should have been dust, but the boxes were clean, like they'd been placed there yesterday. "Who's starting?" Wayne called out. "Can't see what's inside, so the risk is yours." $100, I said. Nobody countered. 100 wasn't much, but people were cautious. They couldn't see what was inside and figured it might be a bad bet. 100 once, 100 twice. Wayne raised his gavel. "Sold to Ethan Cole." Just like that, Unit B47 was mine. After signing the paperwork and making the payment, I got the keys to the unit. The others dispersed to deal with their own units. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped into B47. I started opening boxes. The first one contained old magazines from the 70s, 80s, National Geographic, Life, Time, valuable but not big money. The second box had videotapes, VHS tapes, all blank recordings with handwritten dates on them. The third box had photographs, hundreds of photographs, mostly black and white, old-fashioned. It looked like an ordinary purchase. Maybe I'd make a few hundred profit, maybe not. Then I reached the box in the very back. This box was different from the others, heavy. It had a lock on it, but the lock was broken, like someone had forced it open. When I lifted the lid, I found files inside, manila folders, each one labeled differently. I opened the first file. Inside were photographs of a hotel. No, a motel. Desert Rose Motel, Barstow, California, 1983, was written at the top. The photos showed motel rooms. One caught my attention especially, room 12. The door was open, and inside was a bed, a television, and pale light coming through the window. Below the photo was a note, handwritten. Victim, Jennifer Hartman, age 22. Last seen, room 12, June 23rd, 1983. Body never recovered. Security camera footage missing. I opened the next file. Sunset Inn, Pomona, California, 1991. Another motel, another room. Victim: David Moreno, age 19. Last seen, room 7, August 14th, 1991. Body never recovered. Another, and another. 12 files total. Each one a different motel, a different victim. But they all had something in common. The victims were all in their 20s, all traveling alone, all disappeared from motel rooms, and none of their bodies had ever been found. And they all had the same note. Target: selected by the Unchanged. The Unchanged. That word appeared in every file. I didn't understand what it meant. I opened the last file at the bottom. This file was different from the others. Inside was just one photograph, a picture of a man. Middle-aged, maybe 45, dark-haired, sharp-featured face. Below the photo was a name: Silas Hargreave, Hunter. And next to it a note: "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. It found me too. But you must continue. Study the files carefully, learn the pattern, and you must stop it, because it never stops." My hands were shaking. What kind of nonsense was this? Some kind of game? A creative writing project? But something, the weight of those files in the box, the reality of the photographs, told me this wasn't a game. I pulled out my phone and Googled one of the names from the files: Jennifer Hartman. And there it was, a news article from the Barstow Police Department dated 1983. 22-year-old woman disappears from Desert Rose Motel. Another name: David Moreno. Another article: 19-year-old male mysteriously vanishes in Pomona. It was real. All of it was real. I put the files back in the box and carried it to my truck. I'd forgotten about the other boxes. Only this box mattered, these files. When I got home, I took the box to my office and spread the files across my desk. I began examining them systematically. First file: Desert Rose Motel, 1983, room 12, Jennifer Hartman. Second file: Sunset Inn, 1991, room 7, David Moreno. Third file: Highway 99 Motor Lodge, 1997, room 3, Sarah Beckham. There were 6 to 8 years between dates, but the method was the same. A young person, traveling alone, staying at a cheap motel, and vanishing. Security camera footage always missing or corrupted. No suspects, no motive. And in every file, in the last camera footage before the disappearance, someone entered the victim's room. But this person's face was always blurred or in shadow. Unidentifiable. Was the Unchanged this person? I started reading Silas Hargreave's notes. The handwriting was neat, but some parts seemed rushed, as if time was running out. March 23, 2009. It happened again. Valley View Motel in Riverside, room 18. Victim: Michael Torres, age 21. I reviewed the security footage. At 3:17 a.m., someone enters his room. But there's something wrong with this person's walk. They don't move like a human. There's an odd sway, like the body doesn't quite fit right. March 29th, 2009. I examined Torres's room. The bed is neat, like it was never used, but there's a smell in the bathroom. Sweet, but rotten. Chemical, but organic. The police report doesn't mention this smell. Why? Because by the time I got there, the smell was already gone. But when I went the day after Torres disappeared, the smell was still there. April 2nd, 2009. I reviewed the old files again, going back from the 1983 Jennifer Hartman case, and I noticed something. In all the security footage, the person entering the victim's room is the same. Same height, same build, same odd walk. But that's impossible because these cases span 30 years. How can the same person exist for 30 years without aging? April 10th, 2009. I found the pattern. It only targets certain types of people: young, traveling alone, active on social media, sharing their plans online. It tracks them online. learns where they'll stay, and then it goes there. April 18th, 2009. I found the next target. Her name is Carla Dunn, age 23, UCLA student. On Instagram, she's planning a solo trip to Vegas. She'll be staying at the Fremont Motor Inn on April 22nd. I'll try to warn her. April 23rd, 2009. Too late. Carla is missing. By the time I reached the motel, police were already there. But they're treating it as a normal missing person case. They don't understand. To make them understand, I'd have to show them all the files. But who would believe me? A killer that hasn't aged in decades? It would sound insane. April 30th, 2009. I'm calling it the Unchanged now, because it truly doesn't change. The same in all the footage, in 1983 and in 2009. Same face, same body, but also different. Sometimes I look at the photographs and something feels wrong about its face, like it's a mask. There's something underneath the human face, something different. The notes ended there. Silas Hargreave had left no trace after 2009. I Googled him, searched for Silas Hargreave missing, and there was an article from 2009. Private Detective Silas Hargreave missing in Arizona, last seen at motel near Phoenix. Which motel? The article didn't specify, but I had a feeling. I knew which motel it was. I looked back at one of the files. The last file. Phoenix Star Inn, 2009, Room 21, Silas Hargreave. He hadn't added himself to this file. Someone else had. The Unchanged had taken him too. For 3 days I studied the files. I didn't sleep, barely ate. My entire existence focused on these documents. I was trying to figure out Silas Hargreave's system. How did he find the Unchanged? How did he track it? Among the files I found a note. To understand the pattern, look at the bottom files. Bottom files? At the bottom of the box there were only empty folders, or so I thought. I checked the bottom of the box, and I realized the box was deeper than it appeared. There was a hidden compartment inside. I opened the compartment. Inside was a small key, an old metal key with a number on it, B47U. B47, the storage unit number, U underground. I went back to the storage facility. This time I was more careful. When I entered Unit B47, I examined not just the boxes, but the floor. And there, in the back corner, under the tarp, I saw a hatch. A metal hatch with a lock on it. I tried the key. It opened. Below was a ladder. A metal ladder descending into darkness. I grabbed my flashlight and started climbing down. The ladder went down 15, maybe 20 feet. At the bottom was a narrow corridor. Concrete walls, concrete ceiling. The air smelled damp. At the end of the corridor was a door, a metal door with a handle. I turned the handle and pushed the door open. And before me was a bunker, some kind of underground room. Small, maybe 12 by 12 feet, but organized. Shelves on the walls with more files, more boxes. A desk with an old laptop on it closed. On the wall was a map, a California map with pins in different colors. Red pins, locations of disappearances. Blue pins, locations Silas had tracked. And one green pin, a single location. Moreno Valley, this facility. I opened the laptop on the desk. The battery was dead, but there was a power source under the desk. I plugged it in. The laptop powered on. It required a password. I tried a word I remembered from Silas's notes. Unchanged. The laptop opened. On the desktop was a folder. Target files. I opened it. Inside were hundreds of files, each one labeled with a name and date. But before I looked at those, I noticed another folder. Pattern analysis. I opened it. Inside were spreadsheets, columns of data tracking the Unchanged's hunting cycle. Silas had been meticulous. He'd tracked not just the victims, but the timing, the locations, the moon phases, the weather, everything. And there was a pattern. The Unchanged hunted every 68 to 91 days, almost like clockwork. And it always chose motels on major highways, never in cities, never in small towns, always at the crossroads where travelers passed through but never stayed. Silas had created a prediction model. Based on the last known hunting date, he could estimate when the next one would occur. And based on the victim profile, young, solo travelers active on social media, he could identify potential targets. I scrolled through the predictions. Most were marked in red, failed to prevent, but 3 were marked in green, victim saved. Those were the 3 interruptions Silas had mentioned. 3 times he'd arrived in time. 3 times he'd disrupted the feeding. And each time, he documented what happened. I opened the first saved victim file. Amanda Price, age 24, saved August 15th, 2007. There was a video file attached. I clicked it. The footage was shaky, clearly from a handheld camera. It showed the interior of what looked like a basement or underground space, and there, suspended in that translucent membrane, was a young woman. Amanda. Silas's voice came from behind the camera. She's been here for approximately 6 hours. The membrane is actively breaking down her cellular structure. I can see the degradation, but she's still conscious, still aware. The camera moved closer. Amanda's eyes were open, moving frantically. Tears ran down her face, mixing with the viscous fluid of the membrane. "I'm going to cut you out," Silas said. "This is going to hurt." He cut through the membrane with what looked like a heated blade. The material sizzled and pulled back, almost alive. Amanda fell forward, gasping, choking, her skin covered in that same sticky residue I'd seen in Marissa's bathroom. "Can you hear me?" Silas asked. Amanda nodded weakly. "What do you remember?" "It wore my face," Amanda whispered. Her voice was hoarse, damaged. I could see myself, standing outside the membrane, wearing my clothes, speaking with my voice. But it wasn't me. It was wearing me. The video ended. I sat back, my hands shaking. So that's what happened during the feeding. The Unchanged didn't just consume its victims. It absorbed them, became them, wore them like a suit while their consciousness remained trapped, watching. I opened the second saved victim file. Then the third. Both showed similar scenarios. Both victims described the same horror, watching the Unchanged wear their faces while they dissolved inside the membrane, but all 3 had been saved, cut out before the process completed. And all 3 had survived, though the psychological damage was severe. That gave me hope. If Marissa was still in the feeding process, there was a chance. I opened the most recent file, Marissa_Vega_2024.pdf. When the PDF opened, my heart stopped. The file was new, creation date 5 days ago. But Silas died in 2009. Who had created this file? I started reading. Target, Marissa Vega, age 21, San Diego State University student, last Instagram post, road trip on Highway 15, planned accommodation, Route 66, Motor Court, Victorville, California. Room number, not yet known. Estimated arrival, November 17th, 2024. Today was November 19th. 2 days ago, at the bottom of the file was a note, pattern repeating. The Unchanged is moving again. Target identified. Intervention required. Who had written this? If Silas was dead, who was updating these files? I looked at other files on the laptop. I found a video file, final_message.mp4. I played the video. A man appeared on screen. Old, maybe 60. White hair, lined face. But his eyes were sharp, alert. "My name is not Silas Hargreave," the man said in the video. "But I'm continuing Silas's work. If you're watching this, it means you found Silas's files. And it means you now know about the Unchanged." The man leaned closer to the camera. "The Unchanged isn't human. It's something. I don't know what, but I know this. It doesn't age, it doesn't stop, and it always finds new targets. I was Silas's partner. We worked together for years, and now he's gone. It took him, but I continued, because someone must." The man took a deep breath. "But I am aging too, and I know that soon I'll be gone as well. That's why I prepared this bunker, why I keep these files updated, because I hope someone will find them. Someone will continue. Someone like you." The man paused. "The bunker you're in is your only chance to stop the Unchanged. All the files are here, all the evidence, all the patterns. And there are tools here, tracking equipment, cameras, recording devices. Use them, find the next target, and save them. Because even if you can't stop the Unchanged, you can slow it down. And every life saved is a victory." The screen went dark. I didn't fully understand what I was holding. An underground bunker, decades of files, and a mission: save the next victim. Marissa Vega. I started examining the shelves. The first shelf had tracking equipment, small cameras, audio recorders, GPS trackers. The second shelf had weapons, handguns, tasers, pepper spray. The third shelf had maps and notes. In the bottom drawer, I found something else, a folder labeled Theory. I opened it. Inside were handwritten notes. The Unchanged is a mimic. It imitates human form, but isn't truly human. Security camera footage proves this. Its movements are mechanical, like it's calculating each step. And sometimes, just sometimes, its face distorts on camera. Pixelates, like the camera can't quite capture it. Theory, the Unchanged doesn't just kill its victims. It consumes them, absorbs them. Could it be taking their forms? Does each victim give it a new mask? Second theory, why does the Unchanged choose motel rooms? The answer is simple: control. Motel rooms are isolated. Nobody cares about neighbors. Nobody hears noise. And most importantly, motel security cameras are typically old, poor quality. It uses this ambiguity. Third theory, how does it select targets? Social media? It scours online profiles, finds solo travelers, learns their plans, and waits for them. Reading the theories, I broke into a cold sweat. Could this be real? It couldn't be real. But the evidence in my hands was so overwhelming. I looked at the laptop again. Reopened Marissa Vega's file. There was a link to her Instagram profile. I clicked it. Her last post was 2 days ago. Road trip vibes, heading to Vegas. First stop, Victorville and Hammer solo travel now or adventure. Location tag, Route 66 Motor Court. I looked at the comments section. Her friends were worried. You going alone? Be careful. Don't drive at night. Text us updates. But Marissa hadn't posted an update in 2 days. I scrolled deeper into her profile, examined her old posts. Marissa was a typical college student, parties, friends, campus life. But in the last few months, there was a change. Fewer social posts, more solo photos. In one post, she'd written, "Sometimes I just need to get away, just me and the road." That was the Unchanged target profile. Alone, isolated, predictable. I grabbed my phone and called the Route 66 Motor Court. "Hello, Route 66 Motor Court. How can I help you?" The woman's voice was tired and disinterested. "Hi," I said. There was too much urgency in my voice. I tried to slow down. My friend Marissa Vega stayed with you last week. I can't reach her. Is she still there? The woman hesitated. I can't give out guest information, but hold on. I heard a typing sound. Yes, Marissa Vega. Room 9. She stayed 2 nights. She was supposed to check out yesterday, but hasn't yet. Should we go check her room? My heart was racing. Please, it's very important. I waited. Every second felt like a year. The woman came back on the phone. Her voice had changed. Now she sounded worried. Nobody's in the room, but her belongings are still here. Her bag, her phone, everything. Like she just stepped out. But her car is in the parking lot too. Call the police, I said. Right now, and don't let anyone into that room. What? Who is the... I hung up. I had a choice. Either call the police and tell them what I knew and be seen as a crazy man, or go myself. I gathered the equipment from the bunker, a small camera, audio recorder, GPS tracker, and a handgun. I didn't know how to use a gun, but having it made me feel safer. Victorville was an hour's drive. The whole way there, scenarios played through my head. What if I was too late? What if Marissa was already gone? But there was hope. If the unchanged pattern was correct, victims didn't vanish instantly. First, something happened in the room. Transformation? Consumption? I didn't know. But it took several hours. Maybe I still had time. The Route 66. Motor Court was a typical desert motel. Single story, 20 rooms, half-broken neon sign. There were only 3 cars in the parking lot. One must be Marissa's. I walked into the office. A middle-aged woman sat behind the counter, watching television. She looked up when she saw me. Can I help you? I called earlier, I said. About Marissa Vega. Did you call the police? The woman frowned. I did, but they said there's no crime. No signs of struggle in the room, no blood, no forced entry. Maybe your friend went out with someone and didn't come back. Impossible, I said. Her belongings are there. Her phone is there. Who leaves their phone behind? The woman shrugged. I don't know, but it's not a priority for police. They said 24 hours need to pass before opening an official missing person case. 24 hours, too late. Can I see room 9? I said. Are you family? Because I can only... Yes. Cousin. I was lying, but there was no other option. The woman hesitated, then handed me a key. Okay, but don't touch anything. If there really is a missing person situation, police will want the room kept as is. I took the key and went outside. Room 9 was at the back of the motel, somewhat isolated from the other rooms. As I approached the door, I felt a sense of unease. I unlocked the door. The room was a standard motel room. A bed, a television, a bathroom. But as the woman said, Marissa's belongings were everywhere. Her bag on the bed, open, clothes inside, her toiletry bag in the bathroom, and most importantly, her phone plugged into a charger on the nightstand. I picked up the phone. The screen was locked. I tried guessing a few times, but couldn't open it. I started examining the room. The bed wasn't made. It looked like Marissa had slept in it. There were strands of hair on the pillow, but there was nothing unusual. No signs of struggle, no blood, nothing. I remembered Silas's notes. The room looks clean, but there's a smell in the bathroom. I went into the bathroom. At first I didn't notice anything, but then, very faint, almost imperceptible, I caught a sweet smell. Sweet, but rotten. Chemical, but organic. Silas was right. This smell wasn't natural. I pulled out the small camera from my pocket and recorded every corner of the bathroom. Sink, shower, toilet. Everything looked normal. But then, in the corner of the shower, near the drain, I saw a small mark. A dark stain. Reddish-brown. Blood? Or something else? I pulled out my phone and photographed it. Then, I touched the stain. It was dry, but sticky. When it rubbed on my finger, it gave me a strange feeling, like something was breathing. I immediately pulled my hand back and washed it in the sink. I left the room and checked Marissa's car in the parking lot. It was locked. Inside were normal things: a map, water bottle, snacks. But one detail caught my attention. In the back seat was a journal, leather-bound, small. Since the car was locked, I couldn't get the journal. But maybe Marissa's keys were somewhere in the room. I went back to the room and continued searching. In the side pocket of her bag, I found keys. I opened the car and grabbed the journal. I flipped through it. It was Marissa's handwriting, neat, but in some places hurried. The last entry was from 2 days ago. November 17th, arrived in Victorville. Motel is a bit run down, but cheap. Just staying one night, then continuing tomorrow. So excited for Vegas. But something weird happened. When checking in, the woman at the desk asked me, "Would you prefer room 9? I'd requested a different room, but she said, "Room 9 is quieter." I said, "Okay." But now I'm in the room and something feels off. Like this room has been lived in before. Familiar, but also disturbing. Maybe I'm just tired. The next line was written in a different pen, like it had been added later. Midnight. Can't sleep. I hear footsteps outside my door. Someone's out there, but I don't dare look. Is it just paranoia? I don't know. The last line was much messier, like it had been written in a rush. Someone's knocking on the door, but the front desk didn't call me. Who could it be? I shouldn't open it, but the sounds won't stop. The sentence was cut off. My hands were shaking. I closed the journal and put it in my bag. The night Marissa disappeared, someone had knocked on her door, and she had opened it. And now, she was gone. I went back to the motel office. I asked the woman, "Is there anything special about room 9? Is it frequently chosen?" The woman looked surprised. "Room 9? No, actually the opposite. That room isn't usually preferred. Customers generally don't want it because it's further back, darker. But sometimes we suggest it because it stays empty." In the last 6 months, how many people have stayed in room 9? The woman looked at her computer. Let's see. 4 people. All solo guests. Can I get the names? No, that's confidential. Please, it's very important. The woman stared at me for a long moment. Then she wrote the names on a piece of paper and handed it to me. I took the list. 4 names. Marissa was the last. The others: Kyle Stevens, August 2024. Nina Ramirez, June 2024. Josh Patel, March 2024. I saved the names to my phone and Googled them. Kyle Stevens, 22-year-old male, vanishes near Victorville, last seen at Route 66 Motor Court. Nina Ramirez, 20-year-old female, disappears while traveling on Highway 15. Josh Patel, 23-year-old male, goes missing during Vegas trip. All of them, all missing, and all had stayed in room 9. I turned back to the woman at the desk. "Do you have security cameras?" "We do, but they're not working. Been broken for a few months, haven't had them repaired yet." Of course they weren't working. The Unchanged had made sure of that. That night, the night Marissa checked in, was anyone else around? Did you see anyone unusual? The woman thought for a moment. Not that I remember. It was quiet. We only had 3 guests that night. Marissa in room 9, an older couple in room 14, and wait, there was someone else. A man asked about rooms but said they were all too expensive. He left. I remember because he seemed off. Off how? I don't know, just the way he moved. Stiff. And his face. I couldn't quite focus on it, you know? Like my eyes kept sliding off. Probably just tired that night. My blood ran cold. What time was this? Around 11 p.m., after Marissa checked in. The Unchanged had been there. It had seen Marissa check into room 9, and then it waited. Do you remember what he looked like? The woman squinted, trying to remember. Tall, maybe 6 feet, dark jacket, dark pants. But his face, I really can't remember. Isn't that strange? I was looking right at him, but I can't picture his face at all. That matched Silas's notes. The Unchanged face was always blurred, always difficult to remember. Like it wore a mask that human brains couldn't quite process. I needed to find Marissa. But where would the Unchanged have taken her? I thought back to the files. In every case, the victims vanished from their rooms. No bodies found. No trace. It was like they simply ceased to exist. But Silas's theory suggested the Unchanged consumed its victims, absorbed them. If that was true, then maybe Marissa wasn't dead yet. Maybe she was still processing. I pulled out my phone and looked at the bunker files I'd photographed. There was a pattern to the timing. Victims disappeared around midnight. Their rooms were found empty the next morning. That gave approximately 8 to 10 hours for the process. Marissa had disappeared 2 nights ago. That meant she was gone, already consumed, unless the pattern had changed. I went back to room 9 and examined it more carefully. I pulled out the UV light from my pocket, one of the tools from the bunker. Under UV light, bodily fluids glow. Blood, saliva, other substances. I turned off the lights and swept the UV light around the room. The bathroom lit up. There were marks everywhere, on the shower walls, around the drain, on the mirror, glowing purple under the UV light. But they weren't shaped like blood splatter. They were more like handprints. Dozens of handprints. Small ones, medium ones, large ones. Like many different people had pressed their hands against these surfaces. Or like one thing had pressed many different hands. I felt sick. Then I noticed something else. Near the bathroom mirror, there was writing, glowing faintly under the UV light, scratched into the wall, barely visible under normal light. Words, 2 words. Help me. And below it, more writing, smaller, harder to read. It wears us. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the UV light. Marissa had written this, or one of the other victims, a last desperate message. It wears us. The Unchanged didn't just kill, it wore its victims, like suits, like masks. That's why its face was always different in the security footage, because it was wearing different people. I needed to get out of this room. I needed to think. But before I could move, I heard it. A knock on the door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I froze. Through the door's peephole, I could see a figure standing outside, tall, dark jacket, standing perfectly still. It had come back. The Unchanged had returned to room 9, and it knew I was inside. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The figure outside remained motionless, facing the door. Another knock, 3 times again. Slow, patient. My hand went to the gun in my jacket. But Silas's notes had been clear. Conventional weapons might not work. The Unchanged wasn't human. It was something else, something that could wear human skins like clothing. The knocking stopped. I watched through the peephole. The figure tilted its head slightly, like it was listening. Then it turned and walked away. Its movement was wrong, too smooth, too fluid, like a video played at slightly the wrong speed. I waited until it was out of sight, then carefully opened the door and peered out. The parking lot was empty except for the 3 cars. The figure was gone. But I knew it wasn't really gone. It was waiting, watching. I needed to get back to the bunker. There had to be more information there, something I'd missed. Something that would tell me how to stop this thing. I drove back to Moreno Valley, constantly checking my mirrors. The whole way I felt like something was following me, just out of sight. Every pair of headlights behind me could be it. Every car at a stoplight could contain that thing wearing someone else's face. When I reached the storage facility, it was nearly dark. The place was empty. Most people had cleared out their units hours ago. I parked near Unit B47 and looked around carefully before getting out. The unit was just as I'd left it. I moved the boxes aside, pulled back the tarp, and opened the hatch. The bunker felt safer now, like a sanctuary. The one place the Unchanged might not know about. I went straight to the laptop and started going through more files. There had to be something, some weakness, some pattern I could use. Then I found it. A folder labeled Encounters. Inside were video files, security camera footage that Silas had collected over the years. I opened the first one. The footage showed a motel parking lot at night. Grainy, black, and white. A figure entered the frame. At first glance it looked human, but when I slowed down the playback, I saw it. The way the figure moved, its arms swung too far, its head turned too smoothly. And when it walked past a light, its shadow was wrong. Too long. Too thin. The figure approached a motel room door, knocked 3 times, waited. The door opened. A young woman stood there. She must have been the victim. She said something. The figure replied. I couldn't hear the audio, but I could see the woman's body language. She was hesitant, suspicious. Then the figure did something. It moved its hand in a strange gesture, not threatening, more like showing something, offering something. The woman leaned forward to look, and the figure grabbed her. The movement was so fast the camera almost couldn't catch it. One moment the woman was standing in the doorway. The next she was pulled inside. The door slammed shut. I sat back, breathing hard. That was how it hunted. It lured them close, then took them. I opened another video file. This one was different. It showed the interior of a motel room. Silas must have installed a hidden camera somehow. The same figure entered the room, but this time I could see more details. It was wearing a dark jacket and pants. Its face was turned away from the camera. It moved to the center of the room and stood there, completely still. Then it began to change. The jacket and pants fell away, but underneath wasn't flesh. It was something else, something dark and fluid, like oil or shadow. It shifted and rippled, and as I watched, it reshaped itself. The dark substance formed into a new body, a new face. When it was done, it looked human again. But it was wearing a different face now, a different body. The entity that Silas had called the Unchanged was a shapeshifter, a mimic. It consumed its victims and wore their forms. That's why it had been hunting for 40 years without being caught. Because every time someone got close, it became someone else. I needed to know more. I searched through the files for any mention of where it came from, what it wanted, how to kill it. In the theory folder, I found more of Silas's handwritten notes, pages and pages of speculation. It hunts alone, never seen 2 together. Either there's only one, or they're territorial. It needs to feed regularly, based on the timeline, approximately every 2 to 3 months. It prefers young victims. Theory? Younger bodies last longer, provide more sustenance. Weakness? Unknown. Tried everything. Bullets pass through it. Fire doesn't burn it. How do you kill something that isn't really alive? Observation. When interrupted during feeding, it becomes disoriented, as if the process requires complete focus. The consumption is delicate. Any disruption causes it to lose cohesion temporarily. Second observation, it avoids multiple witnesses, always hunts solo travelers, never attacks when others are present. Possible weakness, it can only maintain one form at a time convincingly. At the bottom of the page, Silas had written one final note in different ink, like he'd added it later. The only way to stop it is to disrupt the feeding. Interrupt the process before it completes. If you can save the victim before full consumption, the entity weakens. It needs time to recover. Use that time to strike. But you only get one chance. After that, it knows you. And it will hunt you too. So there was a way. If I could interrupt the Unchanged while it was feeding, I could weaken it. And maybe, just maybe, I could save Marissa. But 2 days had passed. Was she already gone? I looked at the calendar on the wall. Silas had marked certain dates. I realized they were feeding dates every 2 to 3 months, like he'd written. The pattern was consistent for years. The last mark was 2 days ago. November 17th, the night Marissa disappeared, which meant the Unchanged was still processing her. The feeding wasn't complete yet. She might still be alive. But where? Where would it take her? I thought back to the video footage. After the entity grabbed its victims, where did it go? The victims vanished from their rooms, but their belongings stayed behind. That suggested it didn't take them far. Somewhere close, somewhere private. I pulled up the map of Victorville on the laptop. Route 66 Motor Court was marked. I zoomed in, looking at the surrounding area. Behind the motel was empty desert. Nothing but sand and rocks for miles. But wait, there was a structure. An old building about half a mile behind the motel. According to the map, it was an abandoned gas station, closed since the 1990s. That had to be it. Isolated, private, close enough to the motel to carry victims without being seen. I cross-referenced this location with Silas's notes. He'd marked it. There was a notation. Possible feeding site, never confirmed. Too dangerous to approach alone. But I wasn't going to wait. Marissa was running out of time. I gathered equipment from the bunker, the camera, the UV light, the gun. And something else I'd noticed on the shelf. A flare gun. Silas's note said fire didn't work, but maybe the bright light would disorient it. I also grabbed a tactical vest from one of the boxes. Inside the pockets were more tools, zip ties, a knife, chemical lights, and something labeled thermite charge, emergency use only. I drove back to Victorville. It was fully dark now. The motel's neon sign flickered weakly as I passed it and continued down the road. I found a dirt path that led behind the motel into the desert. I turned off my headlights and drove slowly, using the moonlight to navigate. After about 10 minutes, I saw it. The abandoned gas station. 2 old pumps out front, covered in rust. The building itself was small, maybe 20 by 30 feet. Boards covered the windows. The door hung open. I parked far enough away that my truck wouldn't be visible and approached on foot. As I got closer, I smelled it. That sweet, rotten smell. Chemical and organic. The same smell from Room 9's bathroom. This was the place. I entered through the open door, gun in one hand, flashlight in the other. The interior was gutted. No shelves, no counter, just an empty concrete room. But in the back corner, there was a door. A door that led down. Another underground space, just like the bunker. I descended the stairs. They went deep, maybe 30 feet down. The smell got stronger with each step, sweet and nauseating. At the bottom was a larger space than I expected. The walls were concrete but stained with dark streaks. The smell was overwhelming here, and in the center of the room, I saw them. Bodies, or what remained of bodies, hanging suspended in the air, wrapped in something that looked like translucent membrane. There were dozens of them. Some looked fresh. Others were just skeletal remains. And at the far end, I saw her. Marissa. She was alive. Her eyes were open, moving frantically. She was trying to scream, but no sound came out. The membrane covered her mouth, her nose. She was suffocating, dissolving. The Unchanged was consuming her slowly. I ran toward her, pulling out the knife from my belt. I had to cut her down, but before I could reach her, I heard it, a voice behind me. "You shouldn't have come here." I spun around. Standing at the bottom of the stairs was a figure. It looked human, a middle-aged man wearing casual clothes, but I recognized him from the files. He looked exactly like Silas Hargreave. The Unchanged was wearing Silas's form. "He was a good hunter," the thing said, using Silas's voice. "He almost caught me several times. But in the end, he made a mistake. He came alone, just like you." I raised the gun. "Let her go." The Unchanged tilted its head. "Why? She's mine, just like all the others, just like you'll be." "What are you?" I demanded. "I'm old," it said simply. "Older than your species. I've been feeding for so long I don't remember when I started, and I'll keep feeding long after you're gone." "Silas hurt you before," I said. "That's why you took him, because he figured out how to interrupt your feeding." The Unchanged smiled. "Smart. Yes. He saved 3 victims before I caught him, disrupted my feeding cycle, weakened me significantly. It took months to recover. I don't like being weakened. It took a step forward. But I've learned. Now I take precautions. Now I have a backup food source." It gestured at the suspended bodies around us. "I don't just feed on one at a time anymore. I collect them, store them. That way, if someone interrupts, I can simply feed on another, like a pantry." My hand tightened on the gun. "You're a monster." "I'm a survivor," it corrected. "Just like you. We both do what we must to live. The only difference is scale. We're nothing alike." "No?" The Unchanged began to shift. Its form rippled. Silas's face melted away, replaced by another. A young woman, Nina Ramirez, one of the victims from room 9. "How about now?" it said in Nina's voice. It shifted again. Now it was Kyle Stevens. Or now, again, Josh Patel. "I'm all of them," it said. "Every person I consume becomes part of me. I carry them, wear them, use them. They're not dead. They're incorporated." The thing shifted through a dozen more faces, each one a previous victim. Each one screaming silently through borrowed mouths. It moved closer. I backed up toward Marissa. "And soon, you'll be incorporated too. I can already tell you'll be useful. You're resourceful, intelligent. You found the bunker. You decoded the patterns. You'll make a good addition." "Stay back," I warned, raising the gun. The Unchanged laughed. "That won't work. Silas tried shooting me dozens of times. The bullets pass right through. I'm not flesh. I'm something else. Something your weapons can't harm." I pulled the trigger anyway. The gun roared in the enclosed space. The bullet hit the Unchanged center mass and passed straight through. The entity looked down at the hole in its chest. No blood. Just a dark void that quickly sealed itself. "See?" it said. "Useless." But I'd noticed something. When the bullet passed through, the entity flinched, just slightly. For a fraction of a second, its form flickered, like a television losing signal. Physical damage didn't kill it, but it disrupted its cohesion. I needed to cause more disruption, bigger disruption. I dropped the gun and pulled out the flare gun. The Unchanged saw it and laughed again. "Fire? Really? Silas tried that too." I aimed the flare gun, but not at the entity. I aimed it at the ceiling. The old gas station above us. The concrete was probably holding up rotted wooden beams. If I could bring down the structure, I fired. The flare shot upward, punching through the concrete ceiling and into the space above. For a moment, nothing happened. Then I heard it. Creaking, groaning. The ceiling began to crack. The Unchanged smile vanished. No! Chunks of concrete started falling. The entire structure was coming down. I ran to Marissa and slashed at the membrane holding her. It was thick and resistant, but my knife finally cut through. She fell into my arms, gasping for air. "Can you walk?" I shouted over the sound of breaking concrete. She nodded weakly. I half-carried, half-dragged her toward the stairs. Behind us, the Unchanged shrieked, a sound that wasn't human at all. A high-pitched wail that made my ears ring. The ceiling collapsed. Tons of concrete and wood crashed down, filling the underground chamber. We made it to the stairs just as the room behind us caved in entirely. I pushed Marissa up the stairs ahead of me. My lungs burned. My legs screamed. We emerged into the gas station just as the floor beneath us gave way. I grabbed Marissa and jumped, rolling us both out through the open door. We landed hard in the desert sand. Behind us, the entire gas station collapsed inward with a deafening roar. Dust and debris exploded outward. I covered Marissa with my body until the dust settled, then silence. I helped Marissa to her feet. She was shaking, crying, but she was alive. "It's okay," I told her. "You're safe now." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. In the rubble of the collapsed building, something moved. A hand emerged from the debris, then another, dark, fluid, not quite solid. The Unchanged was pulling itself out of the ruins, but it looked different now, weakened. Its form was incomplete, flickering like a bad signal. It had lost dozens of its stored victims in the collapse, and without them, it couldn't maintain its shape properly. It dragged itself forward, reaching toward us. I grabbed Marissa's hand. "Run, now." We ran. Behind us, the Unchanged shrieked again, but the sound was weaker this time, farther away. We reached my truck and I threw Marissa inside. I started the engine and floored it, tires kicking up sand as we sped away from that place. In my rearview mirror, I saw the figure standing in the ruins, watching us go. Even from this distance, I could feel its rage. I had disrupted its feeding, destroyed its cache of victims, weakened it significantly. But I hadn't killed it. It was still out there, and it would recover, eventually. And when it did, it would hunt again. 3 weeks later, I sat in the bunker beneath Unit B-47, updating the files. Marissa Vega, saved. November 19th, 2024. Victim recovered from feeding site. Entity weakened, but not destroyed. Victim showed signs of partial consumption, memory loss, recurring nightmares of being suspended, unable to distinguish reality from the absorption process for first 72 hours. Full psychological recovery, unlikely. Recommended ongoing psychiatric care. I paused, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. The clinical language felt wrong, like I was documenting a science experiment instead of a girl's trauma. But that's what Silas had done, and his partner before him. Keep it clinical, keep it factual, because if you let the emotions in, they'd destroy you. I turned Marissa over to the police at a gas station 20 miles from Victorville, told them I'd found her wandering on the highway, dehydrated and confused. They'd asked questions, but I gave vague answers, said I was just passing through, saw her stumbling, stopped to help. They'd taken her to the hospital. I'd left before they could ask more. But the truth was more complicated. Marissa remembered everything, being wrapped in that membrane, feeling herself dissolving. Watching the Unchanged shift through dozens of faces, all its previous victims trapped inside it, screaming silently through borrowed mouths. She'd called me twice since the hospital released her. I don't know how she got my number. Maybe she'd seen my truck. Maybe she'd tracked me down somehow. Both times she'd asked the same question. Is it really gone? And both times I'd lied and said yes, because the truth would destroy what little piece she had left. The truth was that the Unchanged was still out there. Weakened, yes. Damaged, yes. But not dead. Maybe it couldn't be killed. The first week after the rescue, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those suspended bodies, saw their faces, counted them. 27. 27 people I'd failed to save. 27 people whose bodies were now buried under tons of concrete and rubble. Their families would never know what happened to them, never get closure, never have funerals. That guilt sat in my chest like a stone. But Silas's notes helped. He'd written about this too, about the weight of the ones you couldn't save, about how it would eat you alive if you let it. You can't save everyone, he'd written. The Unchanged has been hunting for decades, maybe centuries. It had victims before you started tracking it. It will have victims after. The only thing you can do is save the ones you can. And remember, every life saved is a victory. Every life saved is a victory. I repeated that to myself every night. But I couldn't tell the police the truth. Who would believe it? A shape-shifting entity that fed on humans? A monster that wore people's faces like masks? They'd lock me up. Psychiatric evaluation. Maybe worse. So I'd kept the files, kept the bunker, and now I was updating them, just like Silas's partner had done after Silas disappeared, because the Unchanged was still out there, hunting, feeding, wearing the faces of its victims, and someone needed to track it, to stop it, or at least slow it down. I'd become what Silas was, what his partner was, what that unnamed person before them was, a hunter. My entire life had changed. I'd stopped going to storage auctions, stopped buying units, stopped selling on eBay. That business was over. This was my life now. I'd set up Google alerts for missing persons in California, for posts on social media about solo travelers, for motel disappearances. I'd created fake social media profiles to monitor travel hashtags. Hashtag solo travel, hashtag road trip, hashtag wanderlust. I watched for the patterns. Young people, traveling alone, posting their locations, staying at cheap motels. The work consumed me. 16-hour days in the bunker, scrolling through social media feeds, cross-referencing with motel locations, checking the timeline. The Unchanged needed to feed every 68 to 91 days. That gave me a window. If I could identify potential targets before it found them, maybe I could warn them, save them. I'd already sent anonymous messages to 3 people. Don't stay at that motel. It's not safe. Trust me. Find somewhere else. 2 had ignored me. 1 had listened. I didn't know if the 2 who ignored me were still alive. Maybe the Unchanged had moved on. Maybe they got lucky. The one who listened had posted an angry message calling me a creep, but she'd stayed at a different motel, and she was still posting pictures a week later. That was a victory. The bunker had become my home. I'd brought down a sleeping bag, food, water. The storage facility owner didn't question it. I paid my monthly fee. Unit B47 was mine. Nobody else needed to know what was underneath it. I looked at the map on the wall, the red pins marking disappearances. There were so many, decades worth, 41 years of documented kills from 1983 to 2024, and probably more that we didn't know about. More motels, more rooms, more victims who simply vanished without a trace. How many people had the Unchanged consumed in total? 50? 100? More? The thing had told me itself. I've been feeding for so long I don't remember when I started. How old was it? Where did it come from? Was it alien, demonic, interdimensional? Silas had speculated in his notes, dozens of theories, but no answers. Maybe there were no answers. Maybe it was just something. Something that existed, something that fed, something that couldn't be killed. But I knew this, I couldn't kill it. Not with conventional weapons. Maybe it couldn't be killed at all. But I could save its victims. I could interrupt its feeding. I could weaken it. And maybe, if I saved enough people, If I disrupted it enough times, eventually it would make a mistake. Or maybe someone else would find this bunker after I was gone. Find these files and continue the hunt, because that's what the files taught me. The hunt never ends. The Unchanged doesn't stop, but neither do we. I opened a new file on the laptop, started typing. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. It found me too, but you must continue. Study the files carefully, learn the pattern, track the social media, identify the targets before it does, and save who you can, because it never stops. The same words Silas wrote, the same mission passed down. Someone had to carry it forward. I just hoped I'd last longer than Silas did, than his partner did, than whoever came before them. My phone buzzed. A Google alert. Missing person reported, Barstow, California. 24-year-old female last seen at Desert Rose Motel. The same motel from the 1983 file. Jennifer Hartman's motel, the first documented victim. It was hunting there again. After 41 years, it had returned to where it started. That meant something. The Unchanged had patterns within patterns. It revisited locations. Maybe it was territorial. Maybe those places held some significance. Maybe it was drawn back to its old feeding grounds. Or maybe it was sending a message to me, a message that said, I'm still here, I'm still hunting. You can't stop me. I stood up, grabbed my equipment bag, checked the gun, still loaded, though I knew it was useless. Checked the camera, battery full. Checked the flare gun, one shot left. I'd need to buy more flares. I'd added a new item to my arsenal. A high-powered magnesium flare that burned at 3,000 degrees. If bringing down one building had weakened it, maybe more fire, more destruction, more disruption could do more damage. Maybe. Then, I climbed up the ladder, out of the bunker, and into the California night. The stars were bright above the desert. Beautiful. Indifferent. They'd been watching long before humans existed. They'd keep watching long after we were gone. The Unchanged was out there somewhere, in a motel parking lot in Barstow, waiting, watching for its next victim. But I was watching too, and this time, I'd be faster. This time, I knew what I was hunting. This time, I had a chance. I drove north on Highway 15 toward Barstow, toward the Desert Rose Motel, toward another confrontation. The hunt never ends, but neither do we.